Can I invite everyone to take your seats, please? If you're grabbing a drink, come and join us. We've got a few seats in here. We're going to begin very shortly. Oh, you're a very good audience. Everybody goes quiet. Nice to meet everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for being very punctual. My name is John. I think I've got a nice little image of myself here that does not look like me anymore. It's a very old photo. I'll be your host today, and I'm moderating this session. The reason why I'm here is I'm a friend of the author. I've known her for over 10 years, and I'm super excited, super happy for her, and super pumped to just, be a tiny part of it. Thank you all for coming today. I know some of you here are members of 1880 and might be new to Anjali and storytelling, so I'm sure you're going to get to learn a lot more about her shortly, and I'm very excited about that. For the rest of you who've known Anjali and worked with Anjali, huge thank you, and I think maybe before we start, a huge round of applause for Anjali on the launch of her new book. Okay, we've got a short program. I know nobody wants to hear me talk too much, so I'll shut up. Before we start, it gives me honor to invite this very important person in Anjali's life. For as long as I've known her, she's always talked about, and if you know Anjali, you would know her family is the number one purpose for what she does. She's an amazing businesswoman, an amazing storyteller, but beyond that, she is an amazing wife and mom. And a lot of her success, she always attributes to her family. So who better than to invite and come and share a bit about the backstory of this book and how it's been a project 4 years in the making, I'm told. None other than her husband, Dr. Ravi Padmanabhan. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming. It's quite a big ask to come on a Monday evening. It's the start of the week, so thank you all for coming and for supporting Anjali. What?
It's Tuesday.
Oh yeah. I know. I know. That's right. The days are okay. Thank you for correcting me. Tuesday it is, and but anyway, Tuesday is still a good day to come, and. So look, as John said, my day job is a doctor, but my full-time job is actually Anjali's husband, and that's the most important job. And I'm just going to very briefly tell you about how this book has come across, has started. Anjali started writing this in 2020, so that was sort of in a peak COVID time, and I was working from home, usually in my pajamas or something, and like a lot of other people. Or on Netflix or doom scrolling, but Anjali, of course, decides that she wants to write a book. So what better thing to do during COVID time? And so she wrote the book, sort of started writing in 2020. 2021, it was sort of finished, and that search for publishing began. So I'm not sure how much you know about publishing. I knew very little about it before all this happened. But there are easy ways to publish and there are difficult ways to publish. And of course, Anjali chose the difficult way, which was to try and get an international publisher. And they are actually pretty difficult to get. And so she had a number of rejections, which is not such a bad thing. I mean, Harry Potter was rejected many times. Dune was rejected many times. And they have become films and stage shows and everything else. So we're expecting strategic storytelling, the film, strategic storytelling, the stage show to come up. Okay. Yeah. But finally, she did get a publisher, which is Hachette, and Hachette's a pretty big name publisher, and we were expecting that in 2023 it would be published, but as usual, lots of things happen, and in this resulting in the book not happening. And it didn't get published, but finally it did get published in August 15th, and we were very, very grateful for that. And it has, I think one of the things when any of us do anything, well, most of us, I will include myself, is that there's always that sense of, is it good enough? Is it, that imposter syndrome comes up, and is anyone going to read it, all that sort of stuff. And I think when it got published, and the review it got from Seth Godin, I think, put paid to that. For people who don't know, Seth Godin's a pretty big name. And he gave a very glowing review of the book, and and that I think really sort of sealed it, that it was a very worthwhile effort and a great book. And soon after, it had become #1 on Amazon in a number of categories, and also Straits Times, it became a bestseller as well. And and these were, I mean, a lot of the sales, I think, for this were, 10 years of working and having a lot of connections and stuff came through. And the other thing is that the book has been chosen for this Next Big Ideas Club, and it's this is a US-based club where the people who curate it are the likes of Daniel Pink or Malcolm Gladwell. I mean, these are really big names, and they curate these books, and it's been chosen for that, which is quite amazing. And then it became a bestseller again recently. And the reason to put that up again is that this is now not just trade people buying it. This is actually individuals who are buying it, which makes it even more worthwhile. So with that, I'm going to stop. That is a very brief backstory of what happened. And there was a lot of questions. People kept on asking, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? So this is the reason it took a little while. But so I'm going to now hand back to John.
Thank you. Round of applause, please. Thank you. All right. So without further ado, you've heard about how she went about, how she started it and some of the challenges along the way. Now let's hear from the lady herself, the amazing Anjali. If you're new to her, I mean, she didn't want me to do this introduction. She said, just downplay it, don't big me up. But I think it's important to celebrate her achievements for the amazing, talented, person she is. She's a businesswoman, like I said. She is the founder of Narrative, which is a multinational storytelling practice. So she works with corporates, she works with leaders to train teams on how to better tell stories in the workplace, right, to communicate change. Wow, you should hire me. I'm quite good at that. And day to day, she is very passionate about many things. She's an avid runner. She runs for fun, I think 20 click a day or some crazy number like that. It relaxes her apparently. She's very passionate as well about reading. She is a voracious reader, and I actually get her tips all the time about various authors and books to check out. She's got a very, very interesting life and a lot to share. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our author, Anjali Sharma.
Okay, so I think the ask is for me to read one of my...
Yes, she's going to come and share her favorite story from the book first before I ask her a couple of questions. Would you like me to do the honors, or?
Yes,
Yeah?
you
Okay.
can. Yeah, you can keep moving the slides. Well, thank you again. Tuesday night, I'll get the day of the week right. Tuesday night, it's not easy for everybody to come out, so I'm very grateful for your presence. Now, many of you who I have worked with before have heard me tell stories many a times. Many of you. CS is here, Noom is here, Grace is here, Rohit's here, Elena is here, Alondra is here. You've all heard me tell stories in boardrooms, but this is slightly different. My family and my friends and people I don't know are here. And when I was asked to choose one story out of 276 pages that this book has to share with you, I thought for every author, the first story in the book is really the most important story. And it's not a story about me, it's a story about my book. And this story kind of really, showed me the insights into the work that I was doing within the corporates. So it's in the preface of the book, and the title of the story is, "And There Were 4 Dead Bodies Lying." And this is not a drama, this is a real incident. This story was told to me back in the year 2014, actually the very first year that I started my story practice in Malaysia, by a gentleman named Pandai Othman. And we wanted to make a point that we make when we work in large plant areas. So I'll show you a picture for those of you who actually kind of don't have a schema of what a plant looks like. This is an LNG plant. And an LNG plant, there are lots of pipes and stuff like that. And then people kind of work looking like that. This is taken during COVID, so you can also see masks. So the story goes like this. This leader has told this story to make a point that safety comes first. And he says that it was around the time when I was working in Egypt, and it was a normal working day at the plant site. And there were close to 5,000 people working in the plant site. Normal day, everybody's doing their own work. And two gentlemen, let's for the purpose of telling this story call them Abdul and Rahim, were working on a pipe that is 60-inch pipe. Now, just to give you a perspective, a 60-inch pipe is a big enough pipe for a human being to walk into it. It's a really large pipe. So two of these gentlemen are working on that pipe, and we assume that they're doing some welding work. So at one stage, Abdul says to Rahim, I'm going to go inside and check the quality of the weld from inside. So Rahim says, okay. So Abdul goes in, and he doesn't come out for the next 20 minutes. So Rahim starts to get a little bit worried. So he follows, and he also doesn't come out for the next 20 minutes. Now, people who have watched these two guys go inside the pipe are starting to worry a little bit. There's a little bit of a panic, stress, and chaos. And one more person dashes in and says, they must be stuck behind something. I'm going to go help them get out of the pipe. By the way, as per the safety procedure and protocol, nobody should be going inside without a permit, without breathing equipment, without proper PPE in place. But there is panic, there is stress, there is chaos, and one after the other, 3 people are now inside the pipe. The supervisor comes and says that everybody, we need to evacuate this area. What is going on? Why are these people going inside and not coming out? So one gentleman, who's actually the friend of Abdul, comes and says, we're all sitting here watching the show. What's the point? Let me just go in. I'm going to be the courageous one to help my friends, and I'm going to go in. Everybody tries to hold him, but he doesn't listen. So now we have 4 people inside the pipe, and everybody has to evacuate the area. So now there's no one there, and what happens after this is only learned during the debrief. Everyone's asked to come for a debrief later in the evening, and when they reach the debrief site, there are 4 dead bodies lying. This is how the story started. There are 4 dead bodies lying, covered with a white cloth. And the supervisor of the plant site is 6 feet 4 inches tall. He's from Texas. He literally wears cowboy boots to work. He's this larger-than-life personality, really the epitome of strength. And he's choking. And he says to everyone that my job today is to tell these people and their families that these people are not coming back home. Now, what happened inside the pipe? Now, what happened was this. If any one of you has ever worked in a plant site, you would know when you're welding a pipe, to make sure that the quality of the weld is good, you push inert gas into that area. Inert gas forms this layer between oxygen, water vapors that is already present in the Earth's atmosphere and ensures that the quality of the weld is good so that it doesn't corrode and the quality is as they want. So there's a lot of inert gas within that pipe. And if any one of you actually knows what inert gas has, then you would know that it has no oxygen at all. So what happens in that moment, I have to get this pronunciation right, I have practiced it a lot. What happens in that moment is what is called asphyxiation. Am I correct? Okay, all right. I've been told to pronounce that correctly today. Asphyxiation happens and they die on the spot. Now, when this story, there's 0 oxygen, you fall dead within seconds if you walk into an environment where there is inert gas. Now, when I told this story, as an audience, some of you gasped. Some of you went, oh, it's a really good story. In fact, this story, it's a good story. I mean, 4 dead bodies, good story as in like it has an impact. It's not a good story that 4 people died, but it has an impact. So when I tell this story, it's not unusual for me to hear people have this physiological reaction. But the same story, if I ever tried to use in a boardroom and told my boss, safety comes first, we have to shut our plant because things like this can happen. For 1 week, we have to train our people, do this, that, and everything. And this is the story that should motivate you to believe that safety comes first. My boss is going to say, find a way to ensure that the plant is running and also people are safe. He's not going to shut the plant, okay? Now, many people say the boss is human. Why wouldn't he shut the plant? Well, to which I say that the Boeing downfall, we knew Somebody had already told about safety issues with that. Look at what happened in February 2003 with Space Shuttle Columbia crash. 16 minutes before coming back into the Earth's atmosphere, the space shuttle crashed. A lot of people know that. I know that particularly because one of the astronauts who died was a woman of an Indian origin, the first woman of an Indian origin to go into space. And a gentleman by the name of Rodney Rocha, who worked at NASA, had already told the management that if we don't do something when this craft comes back, it is going to disintegrate. To which I also say the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster, there is a professor by the name of Katsuhiko Ishibashi, an expert in tectonic plates, who had already told and warned that if we don't do anything about the current situation and the maintenance of the plant, soon there is going to be a nuclear disaster here. In all these situations, people had already told stories, got people to imagine, yet no action was taken. The point I'm really making here is that there is more to storytelling than just telling a good story. We all feel, wow, what a great story. And then we start telling it, and we never get the results we want. That is why the title of this book is Why Some Stories, Despite Being Really Good Stories, Never Drive Your Success in the Corporate World, but some do. And that is the heartbeat of this book.
Thank you, Anjali. A round of applause, please. Can please join me and have a seat? We'll chat a little bit more about the book. That was very heavy. I'm not sure most authors would start with a story called Four Dead Bodies. But yeah, I think that I could tell everybody in the room kind of really was very drawn to that. Anjali, we talked about this earlier. The title of this book is Strategic Storytelling, Why Some Stories Drive Your Success at Work But Others Don't. But I've known you for a long time, and I know you did not start your career in storytelling. So I think I'm curious, and maybe for some of those who are new to you in this room, what drew you to it? And why did you get started on this journey of storytelling?
Yeah, so, John had given me the questions beforehand that he's going to ask. And, I'm a huge fan of Bollywood, and every Bollywood star who does well always says that I was an actor in my mother's womb. And I thought I could say I was a storyteller in my mom's womb. But that's not the truth. That's not the truth. The truth is that storytelling didn't attract me. What attracted me back in 2012 was this desire to have control over my schedule. And I didn't want to be on someone else's calendar. That I have to be in a meeting. I wanted some autonomy. I wanted some flexibility. My daughter was growing up, and I wanted to be more there for her, but yet also be there for my work. And I was really finding it hard to figure out how could I do that. And at that time, that started the quest to want to find what is my gift? What is it that I'm good at? When you kind of come to a place where you say you want to change, then you look for what can I change with? That's the next question. And today I have a language for it, but at that time I didn't know how to describe it. If you've read this author's book, Naval Ravikant, he says that all of us have a specific advantage, thing that comes naturally to you and you're good at, what others find hard. So a lot of my clients had always told me, you're a good storyteller. But when it came to choosing it as a profession, I thought it sounds more like a hobby. If I told my mother that I'm doing storytelling, she'd say, oh gosh, maybe you should do that on Saturday evening. Doesn't sound like proper work. But I felt like that was my specific advantage. I could do it with ease. That lasted for a couple of years. I think the natural talent can get you forward for a few years, for a couple of years. After that, that whole flamboyancy that comes as a gift starts to fade. And I think no matter what book you read, no matter what course you attend, you can't pivot that further. And that's where the intensity of work gives you those new insights that makes you unique within the space. So I think the desire was to actually be in control of my calendar. That was the desire, because I wanted to be there for Maya. Then it was like, what could I do that comes naturally to me, the specific advantage, and I felt like storytelling was something that I could do. And then finally, it was like, how can I really gain mastery on this subject? Because after 2 years or so, you start sounding like everybody else if you actually don't have the intensity of work, because you're just relying on course and book knowledge. And the real knowledge comes from the projects that you do. So that's how it came about.
Thank you. And I think I'll speak for, a lot of people who know you. You are a master storyteller. I guess some of us in this room might have the question then, if we're not born with the natural skills like you do, is storytelling still possible for us with a lot of practice? I'm assuming that's maybe why you decided to write this book as well.
Yeah, as I said, the talent only lasts for a couple of years or so, After that, it has to be a skill. You have to stand out and to be different and to do something unique. You have to get technical about your subject, because everyone has a lot of people can wake up in the morning and feel like a storyteller, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think, for example, if somebody says to you, why is the COVID story an interesting narrative? I think if you analyze it from a technical point of view, it has many unexpecteds, right? The borders are closing, now they're opening, now they're closing again, now this is happening. So if you analyze that narrative, you're able to look at it and go, that multi-layer unexpected is what makes it really interesting. There are stories that have a single arch of unexpected and they're not as interesting, but when you have many layers, so you should be able to analyze your subject with some level of technical knowledge and skill. So the point I'm making is that even if you don't have the talent, or if you have the talent, eventually you have to get to the technical knowledge and the skill of it. And if you start with no talent, then also it's absolutely the same as someone who has talent, maybe because they have the first 2 years of, sort of ahead of you, but then they'll come to the same place as you. So you can get the skills and you can actually be a great storyteller.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people nodding in the audience. I'm just going to see any questions from the floor? Anybody wants to ask the author anything in particular, any burning questions? If not, I've got one more. You took 4 years to finish this book, right? It's a long time. What was the biggest lesson that you've learned from the process of writing this book?
Gosh, 4 years teaches you many lessons, but what is the biggest lesson? Okay, I'd say probably two. One is you actually don't know what you want to write unless you start writing it. Writing is a doing thing. It's not a thinking thing. So what I meant was, like, there were moments in the process of writing where my husband packed me in my bag and put me in a hotel and said, don't see us for a few days and keep writing. Keep writing. And, he packed me in a hotel, and then he said that neither Maya nor I are going to talk to you. You just write this book. And I realized that as I kept writing is where I started developing the real insights. So I think the point I'm making is, irrespective of writing or irrespective of running or irrespective of whatever, you don't know what you know until you start writing. Because that writing process, there's this beautiful visual by a psychologist, I don't know the name of the psychologist, where he shows that if you hold the water in your hands, it falls everywhere. That's speaking. But when you put the water in a glass, it takes a shape. That is writing. And writing is like putting it in the glass and really shaping it. But if you feel like writing a book, I think you have to start writing it. There is nothing like, I know it exactly what chapter will have what. There's nothing like that. The next chapter you become aware of it as you write it. That's a very practical thing I learned. Spiritually, what did I learn? Spiritually, what did I learn was the difference between optimism and faith. Optimism is, this will happen on that day. 15th of August, 2023, my book will launch. I'm optimistic. I have a set date. That's the day it has to happen. Faith is, it'll launch. Don't know when. It'll launch, almighty. You are there watching it. My job is to do the deed and do the work and then leave everything else in your hand. I now know why it took 4 years. Because the kind of love this book has shown me, the emails that I'm getting, I don't think it was time for it a couple of years ago. I was very frustrated when it took so long for it to launch. It was the question I hated the most was, when is the book coming out? I'm like, can I just kill you if you ask me that question? I think I learned the difference between optimism and faith. That was the second thing. Yes?
The question? Yeah.
You said you are great.
Oh, he said that. I didn't say that.
True, I say that.
You are, if you have a book out, what benefit you to be a great storyteller? First question. And second question, what important about storytelling? What essential things, few essential point about storytelling?
Right. So, what benefited me is the first one, and what are the essential things of storytelling? Okay, I'll answer. Sorry, what's your name? Ime. Ime, okay, so what benefited you? So I think, forget about me, let's talk about people in general. And because my personal experience is the same. So I'm very blessed to work with one of the most, like the smartest of smartest people in the corporations, right? Like they're really smart. They're CEOs, they're head of technology, they're whatever. Like they're really smart, head of AI. Their only problem is I know what I'm doing, but what shall I say? They don't understand, right? So I think the only differentiator is a story, right? If you run, do you wear Lululemon clothes? They're so expensive. One shot, 112. But it's the story that makes us buy that, right? Everything is the same. The only differentiator is the story. What benefits people is that your ideas, your vision, there comes a point in our career where we actually need to make people move in certain direction. We can't just do our work. We have we're only called a leader when we can take a group of people and move them in a right direction, right? And that is only possible if you can actually tell a story. If you want to be an individual contributor, fine, don't read the book. Don't learn how to be a storyteller. But if you want your ideas to be told, you want a vision to be established, everything is a story, really. Like, what's the difference between Apple products and Samsung products? The only difference is the story. Who tells what kind of a story? The second question is, what are the essential elements of a story? Ime, you have to buy the book.
We've got a counter up there. No, but I agree. I think we've got one more question there. Go ahead.
Elizabeth also has a question.
Sure, we've got two questions on the floor.
Know which are your top 3 actions, must-do actions, for who wants to develop more those skills of storytelling?
Yeah. I think the best places to actually, you'll see some hats that often come, like I've got these hats over here, what they really are, different types of storytellers that you are. Like certain people have a very journalistic style of storytelling, certain people have a very visionary style of storytelling, some people are very reflective style. So these are the styles that are mentioned in the book. And I think you only discover what you are really good at once you start telling stories, right? So I think my first thing would be to actually really start telling stories, start using them, right? Every story that is told is better than the one not told. Whether it came out the way you wanted or not, it doesn't matter, because you're actually going to learn from that experience what part of that actually excited me and what part of it I felt like I'm faking this a little bit. So you will leverage your own style more. Okay, so first part is really start telling it. Those of you who don't know, I wanted to practice my own storytelling, so I just started a series on every Saturday called Thank God It's a Story Saturday, which forced me to read, find, watch interviews, and every Saturday I record a story and I publish it. It's a discipline I've had since 2017 without missing a Saturday, because I wanted to understand what my own style is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that most people think that they know how to tell a story, and it is true. They just don't know how to tell a good story. There's a difference between storytelling and good storytelling, right? And I think it's always good to take help from knowledge that exists, whether that be in the form of a book or whether that be in the form of any course. The third thing I would say is that when choosing a book or a course, you choose the right one, because a lot of the storytelling courses are this big storytelling, which is movie making, which is commercial designing, not the ones that are actually suited to the boardrooms. They're very different types of storytelling. So I think knowing as to what do you need the story for and then finding the right aid is really, really important.
Thank you. You had a question?
So I happen to have done a master class with Anjali a few years ago. Going back to your question about the benefit, one of the things you shared that I learned, picked up from you, is that stories tend to be more memorable. And I've tried that, I've tested that when I'm on a panel where a year later they remember what I shared, whereas they don't remember what 3 other panelists did when they just answered. Yeah. But one question I have for you is on that note, how much preparation did storytelling to the speaking part, right? Because I think there's perhaps a myth that because it's storytelling, and if you're a good storyteller, like at a party, in a social setting, you can wing it. You can do that when you're at a panel or when you're speaking in a boardroom or on stage. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because there seems to be a perception that storytelling is like this very informal way, and that if you're a natural storyteller, that you either have it or you don't, right? And you don't prepare. But I know that you probably have a lot more discipline in preparing for those stories and picking the stories and how you present them.
Well, again, my husband's here and my daughter's here. They know that the lights turn on at 4:30 a.m. in the morning because I have a keynote and I will be practicing again and again. And, my poor husband is actually sitting in a hospital in Australia. He's a doctor, as he mentioned, and he'll be scanning and I'll be like, can you please listen? I'm about to get on the stage. I'm a bit nervous. Can you listen to my speech, please? And what I'm trying to really tell you, and this poor guy, he'll say, okay, and then he'll go out, and then he'll very patiently listen. Or, I even use the dog. Like, I'll put the dog in front, I'll say, you have to listen. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that, after 10 years also, there is no substitute for preparation. And I'll tell you why that is. The danger of a good storyteller is going off track, right? And if you prepare, and you really prepare, you stay on track. And I think that is a really, really important thing. You can't skip a preparation. And it can't be, I have a keynote, so I will prepare now. You have to always be curious about stories and be thinking, oh, that story in the New York Times, very interesting. I'll just put it in the back burner. I'll use it sometime. Oh, that story in that interview was really interesting. Then I'll use it some other time. No matter who you are and what you do, Indra Nooyi, ex-CEO of PepsiCo, failed no subject ever. The smartest, the brightest, failed one subject in university, communications, right? Why? Her brain thought much faster than how she could speak. So she said, I had to learn this. Now I prepare. Steve Jobs, the master storyteller, prepares the hell out of it, right? There is no substitute for preparation, no matter how good you are.
All right, thank you. Oh, we've got one more. I think that might be the last question in the interest of time, but go ahead.
Lucky me. My name is Klaus Nendler. I have a question. What's your view on the role of Gen AI like ChatGPT, Claude, and those types of things in storytelling today and in the future?
Okay, so yesterday I was actually speaking at an event, and after me, the CEO of the company spoke. And he said, as we delve deeper into this problem, I'm like, ChatGPT, hello, delve. So if you don't know, delve, if you hear someone say the word delve, almost always it's a ChatGPT generated script. Because I forget the name of the country, but there is one country in the world, and if you remember, Nigeria? Okay, this is my Wikipedia. Nigeria, which is where real humans actually sit and manage this whole this ChatGPT, because they didn't want to get into that issues that many other platforms have gotten into with trust and safety and all those issues. So there are real people who manage it, and in their language, the word delve is heightened, like they use that a lot. So they put a lot of that in correcting things in the data. So the data just naturally has a lot of the word delve. What am I trying to say? Why am I saying this? The point I'm trying to make here is that it's a very generic output for Gen AI generated things. Where I think Gen AI does really well is like if I have a story, I just put the rough story in it and I say, what do you think is the point of the story? Sometimes it tells me the point of the story that I had also not seen, and it's a very interesting angle. Very quickly, an example. I put a story of a doctor in Vietnam who actually has just finished his training, goes and conducts a surgery, and opens the patient up and gets very nervous and closes the patient because the anatomy does not look like the anatomy he'd actually studied in the medical school. And I put the story in ChatGPT and I asked, what do you think is the point of the story? And ChatGPT tells me, our studies are usually two-dimensional, but as medical practitioners, our work is three-dimensional. I was like, whoa, I didn't think of that. What I was thinking about is, lack of hands-on experience, lack of consultation, but I wasn't thinking about that aspect. ChatGPT is an amazing tool, really good from creative aspect, hopeless from analytics point of view. You have to give it good data to get good data out of it.
Thank you. Anjali, I think last question for me. Other than practice, what are some of the things that determine one's ability to do good storytelling, especially in the boardroom or in the corporation?
This is our last question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not rehearsed, guys.
Okay. So, I'll talk about good storytelling. Well, the whole use of storytelling to engage, inspire, motivate, influence is dusty, old, and predictable. It works. It works, but it's been working for centuries. I think there is a very unique kind of use of storytelling, which is really how do you look at the story data and draw insights from it and change culture, right? But that requires working in corporations and organizations where you have a leader who has courage, right? Courage to do something different with stories. Because I don't have like this tapestry of work that I can show and say, here's like 10 case studies on the amazing work I've done that has never been heard with storytelling. I don't. So I'll go with this fresh idea and I'll look at the leader and I'll say, you want to take a calculated risk with me? We could try this. Most leaders will say, nah, I want a roadmap to success. You find this unique leader who will say, it's a calculated risk, let's take it and see what happens. And that's where phenomenal work happens, right? The kind of work that you've never seen before. In fact, in my 10 years of doing this work, there's 15 people I have come across who have done things like that, who are willing to take that first chance to explore, even if they don't know it'll be successful or not. All those 15 guests, 15 clients of mine, are actually mentioned in the first few pages of the book in the acknowledgement section. And I am very, very pleased 3 of them are here in the audience today, which is a perfect segue into...
Yeah, let's invite the 3 of them to join us for the official launch of the book. First up, we have got C.S. Chua, President and Managing Director of Infineon Technologies. Round of applause, please. Next up, we have Grace Carrison from LinkedIn, Head of Sales Solutions at APAC. Come join us. And then finally, we have Noom Puvarawan from Airbnb. Please join us, Trust and Safety. All right, take a seat. Okay, before we start our sharing, I'm going to invite you guys to officiate the launch of the book. So we've got this giant mock-ups in front of me. I'm going to invite you guys to untie the ribbon, open the book, and then just retrieve the book from within and share it with the audience. All right, we'll take a group photo as well.
We'll skip the retrieving part, just show.
Okay, we'll just show the book. Okay, come. Pass it to each one of you. Here you go.
Thank you.
All right, so maybe on the count of 3, may I invite you to then unwrap the ribbon and then open the book and share it with our audience. All right? Ready? 3, 2, 1, let's do it. Let's take the book out and show it to the audience. A round of applause, please. Thank you guys for launching the book, Strategic Storytelling. Come, I'll take it from you. I think we've got a couple of very interesting stories that we wanted to share. CS, maybe if I can invite you first to tell us. I'm hoping all 3 of you have read the book, because if not, it's not going to be very convincing. I myself had to read it over the weekend because it's out of stock, not because I didn't want to read it. Can I invite you, CS, first and foremost, to share with us your favorite story in the book and maybe talk a little bit about it? I believe it's his story.
Okay. Yeah, so my story was when I spoke to my organization, I started off with, many of you knows I am originally Malaysian Chinese, but many may not know where I come from, where I came to Singapore alone, without my parents, at the age of 12. So what happened was, when I came to Singapore at the age of 12, I studied in Chinese school when I was young, before I came to Singapore. So when I first came to Singapore and I joined the secondary school, I did not have the school uniform. So they allowed me for first maybe 1 week or so wear my former school uniform from Malaysia. So I wear the uniform, of course, a very odd person. And what happened is one day, I think it could be even the day one or day two, along the corridor, I was stopped by a discipline master of the school. And I get scolding from him. And of course, his voice get louder and louder. And the clouds start to form because many students were quite curious why this odd person get scolding from the discipline master. And the worst thing is, I have no clue what did he say. Because I came from Chinese school and I did not study English. And then it get really loud and loud. So at the end, I found what happened was that because of my old school uniform from Malaysia, I was allowed to wear a belt. But during that time, about 40 years ago in Singapore, you're not allowed to wear a belt to school. That was a rule. I think now has changed already, but during that time it's not allowed. It's illegal to a certain extent. That was the reason why I was scolding. So what happened is, the lesson I learned is that actually I didn't have so much time to pick up my language. Initially, I thought I could take my own sweet time to learn the language because I was able to converse in English, I was able to converse in Bahasa, Malaysia, so I could speak to even the non-Chinese student. So I realized that I actually don't have much time. I have to learn the language really, really fast. So in such an event where it's really uncertain and of course fear, I fall back onto my unique strength. I look into what my belief is. My strength, at that time I realized, first, I was really good in Chinese, and I was also good in mathematics. And I like to also teach. So what I did is I used this skill set I had to exchange with my friends, classmates, where I could actually teach them what they are weaker at. I think you may know that many of the Singaporean Chinese are not so good in Mandarin, and also mathematics, because mathematics you don't need English, it's just number. So I can get away with that. So that is where I believe, and I developed this belief that in times of uncertainty and fear, you have to fall onto your unique strength, and you will have a much better future eventually. So that was the story I had.
Wow, thank you, CS. Round of applause. That's a really powerful story, and you've obviously come a really long way from the guy who got yelled at by the discipline master. Next, can I invite Noom to also share your favorite story from the book?
I don't have a reading glass. I don't have a reading glass like CS, so I might reveal my age a little bit here. I grew up in Bangkok, Thailand, in a tech-oriented family. My dad is a professor in computer engineering. So I grew up surrounded by many family members who obsessed about computers. And because of that experience, I wanted to be someone different. I want to differentiate myself from them. And I was somewhat successful because I managed to be the only one in the family who could not code. So, and I had absolutely no interest in how computing technology could change the world. My perspective shifted when I was 15. I went to study English during the summer months, a short stay in the UK. That was 1993, during the time when the internet started to come into Thailand. So because this was going to be my first trip overseas, my dad helped me create an email account and taught me how to use the email. And he instructed me, when you reach the UK, you had to find a computer and modem and find a way to send me an email. Remember, that was 1993. That was before mobile phone, laptop, free internet were accessible. So off I went, the first adventure out of the country in my life. I remember vividly when the plane landed and I stepped out of the plane. The UK air smelled so different. Even the trees, the birds, the mountains, they all look so different. But what made my trip very unique and different was the fact that I got to stay with my very first host family, Barry and Cynthia. Barry and Cynthia were retiree couples. They live in a small town in the UK, and they occasionally host foreign students. My first encounter with them, I was very eager to find a way to send my dad an email. So I asked them, Barry and Cynthia, where in town, may I ask, that I could use a computer and a modem? I'd like to send my dad an email. They responded, email? What was that? So I tried to explain to them in the best way possible. I'm gonna send a letter, I'm gonna write a letter in the computer, and I'm gonna press send. And my dad in Bangkok will open his computer, and he will receive my letter instantly. I thought they would know what I meant, and if not, it must be because of my pronunciation. But to my surprise, they shook their head and said, we never heard anything like that before. So the conversation carried on, and it's very clear to me that they never host anyone from Thailand before. They were very curious. They asked me many questions like, what was it like to live in Thailand? Do I have a TV at home? Or do I have a refrigerator? Do I have electricity? But one of the more memorable questions I recall was, do you ride an elephant to school? And that moment struck me. I thought I came from a developing world where we had a lot to catch up when it comes to first world technology. But I realized I already had access to the first world technology. And here I am sitting in the household in the UK with no access to the internet. It gave me, for the very first time, the realization of this emerging technology, and that the internet will be the equalizer that provides access to people around the world, regardless of where they are. I was too young back then to really comprehend how the internet could change the way we live in the next 30 years. But that very small encounter gave me enough motivation that I want to be part of this movement. Perhaps I don't become a software engineer, but I could, in my own capacity, be part of this emerging technology that help provide equal access to people around the world.
Thank you. Great story. The point is to always listen to your father. You can run, but you can't hide.
I will ask ChatGPT about the point of this story.
All right, so let's start our panel discussion now. I think my first question is for you, Grace. As the head of sales solutions at LinkedIn, and we talked about this as well, right? I think people naturally assume that you must be a master at storytelling. This must be easy for you. You probably rolled out of bed and could do a better job than Anjali. But tell us, how did you get started and introduced to storytelling?
Sure. Firstly, I do want to congratulate Angeline on the success of your book. And love both of your stories as well. That book was written before Anjali and I met, shortly after COVID. So hi everyone. I'm Grace Carrison. I work at LinkedIn, and for many of you, you probably know LinkedIn as that blue app on your mobile. It's a social platform, and there's a story behind this. And the reason why I like to highlight that is what you might not know is underneath that blue logo on your mobile is the world's largest kind of representation of the global economy. We call it the economic graph. So we use a lot of data. We give a lot of data to the government, actually, to policymakers, to develop, to basically invest in programs. And we do that with companies as well. And so being a data-driven company, we say a lot of data. And sometimes it's not memorable. And so the story with Anjali was I rejoined LinkedIn in 2020 after working for a startup. And one of the things that I recognized during COVID was how much a leader's role have changed. It's not only around you have to lead in a traditional way, but you have to embrace and also encompass what HR would also do around compassion, empathy, communication. And those are a lot of new skills that leaders were having to learn. And when I rejoined, I'm kind of going, I joined in the midst of COVID, July 2020, and I inherited an organization. I was stuck in Singapore, and I have a team across Asia Pacific. And that is where Anjali and I got connected through another client, is around how do I have my stories be more relatable? But as the borders opened up, I was actually bringing in my whole leadership team into Singapore. And that's when I knew that, one of the things that needed to happen was, as we went into a hybrid world, we needed to drive a change within the organization as well. Me as a new leader, and I don't know how many of you work for a multinational company, ideally I've always worked for an American company. And the one thing that I know about APAC is that you will always have the least amount of resources. You will, right? you will have the least amount of budget for marketing or anything to spend, right? And but I did work for Microsoft, which taught me that in a constrained environment, that's when you become innovative. And that was the cultural change that I wanted to drive within the organization, and that LinkedIn was growing up as a company, but it doesn't mean they're going to throw headcounts, they're going to throw more money as far as investments in Asia Pacific. But what would be our brand? What do we want to be known for as far as Asia Pacific in the global sense in the business that I run? And what I really wanted to showcase was that this is the region that is so diverse that it should be where innovation kind of sits. And that was the brand that I wanted my team and I to have, is North America is too big, EMEA is too big, but we are the most agile to be able to pilot, innovate, and try new things. And so Anjali and I got connected, and one of the books, so again, I'm not a great storyteller, by the way, and I'm still learning, but one of the things that she equipped me with was her books. And one of the books that she gave me is called A Beautiful Constraint by Adam Morgan. And I don't know if any of you have read that. That I've got two members of my leadership team here, that it's actually become embedded in our kind of culture within APAC, is that when you are resource constrained, how do you pull a diverse team of very talented people together to go, how do we do things differently? And that book is where I kind of counted on little stories such as, do you know why the Google page, it is what it is, very simple, is because Larry Page couldn't code at that time. Do you know why Twitter has, 140 characters? Because again, as there was a limitation, but look how far it went. And so for me and my team, it was about how do we drive innovation? And the brand at the end of, by the end of that year that we've kind of come up with is, we will innovate to scale. That innovation will help, will be done here in Asia Pacific. We will write the playbook so that other markets can actually repeat that playbook, and our impact will be, 1,000x more impact than if they were to do it on their own. So that's how I got to know Anjali, and we worked on 3 other projects, after that.
Thank you, Grace. It's nice to, round of applause, thank you. It's nice to have the 3 of you here, because I think you present very different perspectives and experiences, right, of storytelling. And Anjali's book is all about, like you said earlier, it's not just about how to be a storyteller, but to be a strategic storyteller, to drive change in the boardroom. CS, I'm very keen to dive a little bit deeper into what you shared earlier. We won't be able to tell today, right? Obviously, with all of your achievements and interacting with you. But you shared when we first spoke, language was one of your concerns. And as mentioned in the story you shared earlier as well, how do you think that has affected or impacted your storytelling journey?
Before I started working with Anjali on the storytelling, of course, it's always in the misconception that you must have a very good, powerful English speaking so that you can tell a good story. Sometimes when you hear certain speaker that can speak really a beautiful language, always very impressive. And I don't have this advantage because I was brought up in the Chinese language, 100%. Even when I study mathematics, I study history, geography, it was always in Mandarin. So my foundation for English was not strong, especially the grammar part. And forget about the vocabulary. So what I did was, of course, I tried to use simple language, simple vocab, and don't care so much about whether I make the tense right or wrong. So that was how I overcome, let's say, my weakness in the language.
Thank you. I think there were a couple of questions on the floor earlier about this. Nu, maybe this is a good question for you as a practitioner, right? And I was amazed with the way you shared that story earlier. You know, even though I've read it, I've heard it before, I was still like, oh, wow. What do you think are the secrets to being a good strategic storyteller that you would share with the audience here? Somebody's new to it.
I would say invest time to find your own style. So in my case, I'm trying to spend time and develop my own approach and style. And I finished reading Anjali's book, and I realized you talk about different hats. And I didn't know this before, but I think I resonate the most with reflective style. And the way Anjali described reflective storyteller is someone who take notice and on the experience and make that experience become a point. So I realized that, okay, maybe that is my style, and it's also a way for me to overcome my own fear as well, because like CS shared that, you know, language is a barrier for me. I share the same as well. English is my second language, but beyond that, I'm introvert. So by sharing story, it's almost like telling a part of myself into the group. So it always takes a little bit of courage, but by anchoring on reflective style is more comforting for an introvert like me.
Thank you. CS, let's build on that point, courage. I know that's something that you believe in as well, right? In your role, you know, managing as the president and MD of Infinite, you talk to, I imagine, different functions, different users, engineers. No offense against engineers, but they're probably the hardest to communicate with stories. How important is it, you know, to really practice courage when you're putting yourself out there and sharing these personal stories?
I think I echo what Anjali say, is that even you have a good story, which there was the one that she was actually brainstorming with me, what are the good story. Of course, I tell her quite a few, and then she picked this up. You have to practice. No matter, even at today, I was already managing this organization for many years. Every speech I need to make, I have to practice. Even though it's a topic of, a very competent topic of myself, you have to practice. And then when it comes to story, even more important, you have to practice, you have to remember which are the language you want to use, and which point you have to even pause. In the past, when I speak, I could speak very fast. And it's like, there's no full stop, you just keep talking. But what she taught me is at a certain point where you want the audience to remember that part, you have to pause. And what she did, she told me, just take a cup of water and drink, just to face over that 5 or 10 seconds, so that the audience was left with the last sentence that you said, and they will remember. And it's not so awkward, because if you stop for 5 or 10 seconds, it looks like, oh shit, I forgot my script, which is bad, right? So another way you could do is, you know, you just pretend that you take a sip of the water. So you have to practice the night before. I don't have a dog, so I have to look at the mirror. And good thing is, after a while, when my son also realized that when he need to learn to do a presentation the next day, he also asked me to be the audience. So he knew that he also need to practice. So yes, even the topic that you know the most, you must practice.
Nice. Grace, you agree? Do you think storytelling is an ongoing muscle as well that you need to practice?
It is definitely, and I know that everybody's, you know, really busy with, you know, with your day job, but you do need to block time to practice. And the other one too is like be courageous to be different, which is really one of the, you know, when you were saying that earlier was, you know, we had our COO visiting us for the first time after COVID. And, to those of you who may not be aware, the business that I'm leading is, we used to call that in 2020, is like the billion-dollar startup. So LinkedIn has 3 lines of business, and this is the youngest. But when I first joined LinkedIn in 2014, LinkedIn as a business was a billion-dollar startup. And he was coming in here, and it was just back-to-back business reviews from different leaders. And Anjali said, "Why don't you do something different?" Instead of a PowerPoint presentation, she wanted me to go take him back to 2014 when LinkedIn was a billion-dollar startup. And at the time, being a typical kind of hip company, just starting out, we actually had an in-house illustrator who's now an Oscar-winning kind of illustrator in LA. And all of their if you look at Dan Shapiro, his articles will all be illustrated. And so Anjali convinced me to do my business review telling a story on how this business is now the billion-dollar startup that one that he needs to back, that he needs to have faith in, just like he did that with the 2 other lines of business. And I remember the night before, I'm going, "Anjali, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slides." Because that one I know inside out. And but that morning, I kind of said, "Look, what have I got to lose?" And I'm glad I did, because our COO was able to relate to it, and it took him back to that, to 2014 when LinkedIn was a billion-dollar startup. We had a very different conversation, and there were others in the room as well. And the talk of our dinner that night was how different my presentation was, and how they remembered all the other stats that I was actually doing. So to me is being relatable, being courageous, but practice. I practiced both, even though I was about to change it last minute, but I did practice both.
Very nice. Thank you. Grace, I think there was a question earlier, and I feel like you're the best person to follow up on that, maybe, about Gen AI. And how do you think, Gen AI in particular is going to impact and change the way we tell stories moving forward?
Look, for us, is no matter what, Gen AI is going to change the way we work, the way we do things. But the one thing to remember is we're still the one that's in control. It still has to be your voice. It still has to be your story, right? And, as a leader, as I said, is storytelling, but also in the tone and the sentiment that you want to come across. It's you got to change that depending on the audience. So I do use, ChatGPT to do my first draft. But then I kind of go, you know what? I'll take 70% of that, but I'll change, this bit of it. Because normally that would take me 5 hours, because I am a perfectionist. And my husband will be driven crazy, because he's going, that's only one email, Grace. How many more emails do you have to do from a communication perspective? So I think the opportunity here is, it'll help you be more productive from an efficiency perspective. But it still has to be your voice. It has to be you. And that's how I'm looking at it. It's helping me become better at what my job is, because I'm able to do more thinking versus the activity of doing.
I agree. Thank you.
Sorry, by the way, I think what you wanted me to also share is we recently published the trends from a C-suite perspective. And, the top 5 type of skills that's going to be even more important for any leader or frontline manager is communications. And communications that is relatable, that is adaptable to your audience is going to be key. That's why Anjali is very busy
Go buy this book,
in her business.
Everyone. Nu, maybe a final question for you. Speaking of the book, bringing it back to the book, everybody. What would you say is your favorite part of the book, and why would you recommend it to everyone?
There's so many favorite parts, but if I were to pick one, is the part that Anjali talked about. It's not about us telling the audience why they need to change or what they need to do to change, but to help them see the new identity that they can become. And I resonate with this a lot because in the early start of my career, I started off as a brand marketer. And I remember selling consumer goods like soap, toothbrushes, shampoo. We never go there and sell the efficacy of the product. We actually sell the proposition of being a perfect mom, being an elegant lady, being a fine gentleman. And when I transitioned into a tech company, and everything when it comes to internal communications, it's just so heavy loaded on the cognitive part. It's about the why, the data, the what we need to do, and this is why we need to change. It's almost like there's a lack of emotional connection. And it became clearer to me after reading this from Anjali that there's a benefit from pulling the heartstring, just like the way we pull the heartstring of the consumers, but we can do the same in the internal corporate world as well to actually make the changes and the communication more impactful.
I agree. Thank you. And CS, maybe final question for you as well. Any tips or any final advice, right, for the audience here? We come from different experiences, different walks of life. How would you encourage them to embrace and start getting involved in storytelling?
Wow, look, sounds tough. I think each and every one of us will have story. I'm quite sure on a daily basis, every day from your house, you go to work, you will bump into something. When you talk to somebody, whether it's your children or your friend, you will learn something new. So each and every one of us will have a lot of story to tell. The only thing that is important is that depending on, for example, for my case, let's say, for example, tomorrow I would have to deliver a speech on certain topic. Am I able to now pick one of the story that recently happened or maybe 10 years ago that could relate to the topic I want to say? Because if you could do that, it will resonate. It will resonate to the audience and they will remember. They may not remember all the big theories that you try to deliver and communicate to them, but at least they remember that particular event, that particular topic that you want to talk about. I mean, just take AI as one example to say that, okay, we want to drive digitalization. Why it's so important to use Gen AI, for example, all this thing. They might not remember all of them, but once they remember that story, they can say that, okay, I remember CSA, Gen AI, we should try to use it. Digitalization, we should try to use. And that is already good enough. Because that is where you want to move the organization, a few thousand of them, majority of them, to move in one direction. That's what you want to achieve. And you can forget about all the 1 hour speeches that you have, all the buzzword that you have, all the vision, mission that you have. They'll probably forget about it. But they remember we have to do digitalization. That's more important.
I agree. Thank you, CS, Grace, and Noom. Again, big round of applause, please, everyone. Great panelists. And thank you as well for being a great audience, for staying with us. I hope you found, learned something new about the book. We've got more drinks and food right out here. We welcome you to stay with us and have a little chat with Anjali and the rest of the panelists. If not, my name is John. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, guys. All right, please join us for some food and drinks.